All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about a few types of typical risk exposures and a little bit about their relevance as it relates to the insurance process. Um, so just to kind of rattle them off first, and I'll kind of go back over them. We have life or sort of death insurance, health insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, property insurance, liability insurance, including a few different subtypes as well. So let's talk about kind of life insurance. So the basic idea here is that if you die, you're not around to earn an income, and that could have a financial impact on the people you leave behind. And so if you have a family, for instance, you buy life insurance so that if you die, the financial loss of your future earnings is hopefully made up for by the insurance policy. And that's basically the idea. You basically to ensure you don't leave your family destitute, that kind of thing. Health insurance basically is helping to cover for the costs of various things. Say you get diagnosed with cancer or something, and that's obviously horrifically expensive to deal with in most cases. And so trying to cover some of the costs associated with that diagnosis. And there are some interesting properties with that we'll talk about more detail when we get to health insurance. Disability. So let's suppose something happens, you're in a car accident or something else occurs and you are now disabled. And so as a result of that, your financial loss is the loss of future earnings. And so the idea behind disability insurance would be that it would provide a payout that would help to kind of help you recoup some of those financial losses. Long-term care insurance is a little bit interesting as it relates to kind of like health insurance. So it's sort of related in a sense. And it's also kind of related to the disability insurance. So as you get older, typically it's as you get older, you may reach a point at which you are no longer able to care for yourself. And so there are lots of costs that are associated with that. So long-term care insurance would be you pay a series of premiums up front. And then if you have a situation in which you wind up needing long-term care when you're elderly and you can't pay for a nursing home, for instance, then it helps to pay those costs. You can also get property insurance. So the risks that we have associated with that, if you think about your home, you could have tornadoes or hurricanes or floods or fires or a burst pipe that floods your house or things like that. Or if you think about automobiles, you could damage your vehicle. So you could be driving along and accidentally crash into a tree or something, and so you wrecked your car or damaged your car. And so that would be a sort of a property insurance kind of a situation. So we have a risk there, so we can get insurance for it. Various aspects of liability insurance. So oftentimes in a typical homeowner's insurance policy, there's liability coverage associated with the home, so that if a delivery person walking up your steps slips on the icy steps and breaks a leg and then sues you, then they cover some medical expenses and cover some expenses associated with the lawsuit and so forth. So that would be a liability insurance situation. So you're facing sort of a bad financial situation of it was your house, sort of your responsibility to have clean steps. And due to your negligence, somebody slipped, broke a leg, and now you are financially responsible. So, or liable. So we could have liability insurance associated with a home. You could have liability insurance associated with a car, for instance. So if you are in a car and you cause an accident that hits somebody else and destroys their car, in most states, that means you're at fault. And since you caused it in the example, and that means that you're on the hook for making them whole for their destroyed vehicle, possibly also for whatever medical costs they may have associated with the fact that you destroyed their vehicle and hit them in a car accident. So you now have some liability exposure for the vehicle. You have liability exposure for perhaps their medical expenses. And so there is various forms of liability coverage that you can have there that are often bundled with an automobile policy. You could also have liability coverage as it relates to a professional occupation. So if you are, for instance, a physician or something of that nature, and you're concerned about being hit with a malpractice lawsuit, well, you could have insurance to defend you in that situation as well, and kind of cover that liability that you have there as well. So there are many different liability types of coverage. A quick little comment pertaining to these different types of coverage. So think, life insurance, health insurance, disability, long-term care, property liability. One of the things to be thinking about when you're evaluating these different types of coverage is how relevant they are at different points in time. So for instance, if you are younger and have young kids and young family, life insurance may have a lot more relevance. In other words, if you die and you're no longer bringing in an income, the family you're leaving behind may need money. So life insurance may matter a whole lot more. However, if you have been saving and planning for many, many years, and let's say the situation is different, let's say you're, say 65, you're thinking about retiring next year, you already have a well-padded retirement account, and so forth. Well, if you die in that scenario, whoever you leave behind in your family has the retirement accounts and things that you were planning to live off of, in which case maybe your need for life insurance is a lot less at that point. Health insurance, there's always the chance of something surprising you that you wouldn't know about. But also if you are engaged in certain unhealthy activities like smoking, for instance, health insurance starts to make even more sense. I mean, not that you should be smoking, because that's obviously bad for your health. If you are the primary sort of breadwinner in the family, something like a disability insurance may make more sense for you. On the other hand, if you're married and have no kids and basically your spouse is earning most of the income, well, the disability insurance would cover reimbursing you for the income that you would lose if you were disabled. But if you don't really count on your income, maybe that doesn't matter as much. So you would have to evaluate that situation to determine if that's relevant for you. Long-term care insurance, that's one of those things that it's easy to not think about when you're younger, but it may make sense to think about when you're younger because it might be a little bit less expensive to buy the policies. On the other hand, if you have saved extremely effectively and invested in extremely effectively, it's possible that you might have enough retirement funds built up that if you did need long-term care, it might be enough to pay for it. Kind of depends on what your savings and budgeting choices have been and so forth. For property insurance, kind of depends on what sort of property you have. If you don't have a home, then you don't need to insure the building, but you might still need something to insure your property within whatever structure you're renting. So if you have an apartment, you might need renter's insurance, in which case you're just insuring your belongings, but not insuring the building because you don't own the building. And your need for liability coverage then perhaps would be very different. The kind of coverage you'd have for homeowner's liability policy, maybe you don't need that as much because you don't have a home. And if you're renting an apartment complex, you might not even be responsible for clearing the ice off the sidewalks, right? So your need for different kinds of coverage will vary through time and based on your life circumstances. So that's something you have to evaluate very carefully. What risk exposures do you have specifically? And how relevant are they to you, and therefore come up with what your insurance needs would actually be. Hopefully that's helpful, and I will continue on in another video with more content. Have a great day.